Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial. So today what I'm going to be showing you is how you can interact with a MySQL server in Node.js. So I'll be showing you how you can create a database, also post and retrieve text and file data from that database, as well as update and delete that data. So to show you this in my local environment, I'm going to be setting up an SQL server using the XAMPP software. So if you download and install this, you can easily set up a MySQL server on localhost by first starting the Apache server and then adding MySQL. What this gives you is a MySQL server running on localhost that you can view via the PHP MyAdmin interface. Now, if you want to deploy this live and you have shared hosting, usually this will support cPanel. And if you have that, then you should have access to the PHP MyAdmin interface there. And you can access user privileges for accessing the databases via the MySQL databases tool in cPanel. But for learning purposes, I'll be working with MySQL running in my local environment. So the host is going to be localhost and the username will be root. So the project folder that I'm going to be working with, I've already created it here on my desktop, and in my terminal, I'm going to cd into it and create a new node project inside of it. So double flag Y, accept all the defaults for a new project. Now I'm going to install a few packages. The first is MySQL. It's a client for Node.js that allows you to work with MySQL databases. Next, Express, because I'm going to be setting up some routes that I'll be sending some requests to, and it's much quicker to do that with Express than it is in pure Node.js. And finally, the cause package for Express, so I can manage access to the app that I create. Now, if we have a look at the project folder that I already have open in Visual Studio Code, you can see that those packages are now listed as project dependencies. So I'll now start coding my Node script. The first thing that I want to do is import those packages that I just installed. So MySQL, Express, and also the cause package for Express. So I'll create a new instance of an Express app, and by calling cause inside of app.use, I'm specifying that requests from any origin are allowed, and I'll set it to listen on port 3000. Now for connecting with MySQL via the library, so you call create connection on it, and you pass into here an object containing the connection information. So in this case, the host is localhost and the user is root. Now in practice, you'll probably want your access to MySQL to be password protected. So I haven't set a password yet, but you can do that via the PHP MyAdmin interface. So if you go to user accounts and then localhost, change password, and I'll set that to secret. So you can see that we're getting some error messages, and that is because the password for accessing PHP MyAdmin has also changed. So to set the password that we're using to access PHP MyAdmin, you can access this file here and set the password value to the new password. Now when I refresh, we're not getting any errors anymore because we're logging in using the new password. Now I'm going to attempt to connect to the MySQL server, and you can do that by calling the connect method on the connection that you've created, and inside there pass in a function that will run when the connection is established or it fails. So if it fails, an error will be passed into it, and you want to check for that error first of all, and if there is one, stop code execution by throwing an error. If there isn't one, then the connection has been established and this message will be logged to the console. So let's check that this is working so far by running the app. So a connection has been established, and we can move on to creating a database. So to do that, we want to run a MySQL query, which you can do by passing it in as a string to the query method on the connection. So the query is going to be create database followed by the name that we want to give to the new database. After this query has run, the function in the second argument position will run, and if there's an error, we need to check for that. If there isn't one, then we'll get past the if block, and I'll just log a message to the console. So let's see if this works. I'll restart the server. So we are getting the database created message, and if we take a look at the databases on the left hand side here, when I refresh the page, the new database now appears there. So no table exists in the database yet, so let's create one. But first I need to connect to the database that I've just created. So you can do that by calling change user on the existing connection and then passing in the updated details to edit the connection. So information that I don't specify from the original connection will remain the same for the new connection. So it's just the database value that will be updated. And if that successfully completes without error, then I'm going to call a function that I will define called create table. So I'll define it outside the connect method because there's quite a lot of nesting now. So inside here, I'll make another SQL query, this time to create a new table. I'll call it users, and this is going to be a multi-line string. So I'll change that to backticks. So in here, you specify the type of data that the table will support. So it will have an ID value that is an integer. It will increase by 1 each time. It shouldn't have a value of null, and it should be unique. So I set the primary key. The next column will be for the user's name, which I'll set to a value, a character value, and the final column will be where the file is stored. So in this case, a photo. So if there wasn't an error in creating this table, then I'll log a message, table created. Now, if you were to run this code it wouldn't work because a database with this name already exists. And if you try to write another database on the top of it, it will throw an error. So you can solve that by specifying in the query that it shouldn't create a new database if it already exists. And I'll do the same for the table because we'd run into the same problem with that after the code has run more than once. So let's run the code to create the table. So we're getting all of the expected console logs. And if we take a look in PHP MyAdmin, refreshing the page, we now have a new table in our database with the 3 columns, and we can now start posting data into the table as rows of data. So I'll create here a post endpoint for the Express app that I created earlier. And inside here, I'm going to make a query, and that's going to be to insert some data into users. And if I specify set question mark, then I can pass in the data here in an object as the second argument. So the 2 column names are name and photo. Now the photo, I'm going to move this image here into my project folder. So that's now here in the root of the folder. Now I'm going to want to access the file system to get that image. So to do that, I need to import the native file system module and use that to read the image. So it's image.jpg. Now the result of reading the file is going to be an array buffer, but to post it to the MySQL database, it needs to be in buffer format. So to do that, you can just wrap the result in buffer.from, and we still need to add the callback function as a third argument, in which we first check for the error. If there's no error, then the data has been successfully inserted, and because this is taking place inside a post request, I'll end the request at the end of the function. Now I'm going to restart the app and post to the database. We need to make a post request to localhost port 3000/API. So I'm going to be making this in VS Code using the Thunder Client extension. So if you don't already have this extension, you can install it via the extensions marketplace. So the request will be to port 3000/API, and it will be a post request. So we're getting a 200 success status code back, and in the terminal we're getting the record inserted message. I'll just post one more time. So there's 2 rows of data. Now if I refresh in PHP admin, we have 2 rows of data, both containing a name and a file. And you'll notice that even though the content is the same for name and photo, because we set an ID that is auto-incrementing, there was no clash between these entries. So this is how you can post data to the table in the database. Now let's cover how you can get data from the database. So for that, I'll create a get endpoint at /API. So when a request comes through to this endpoint, we're going to run a query and select everything using the wildcard operator, and that's going to be from the users table. Now the result of selecting this will be available as a second parameter in the callback function. So we still need to check for the error first, and after that we can log the result, which will contain the data, and after that end the request. So I'll restart the server and send a request to the same URL. And if we take a look at what's been logged to the console, you can see that the name data was successfully retrieved. The photo file data is in the form of a buffer. So to check that the image data was successfully retrieved, I'll select the photo data from the users table and the one with the ID of 1 only. So let's check what output that gives us. So it's inside an array in an object on a property of photo, so that we can check that the photo is being returned successfully. I'll just paste in some code here that's going to set some headers on the response, telling the browser to display the photo on the page, also specifying a file name and the file type, and finally send the image to the user. So it's on result. It's the first element in an array, and it's on the photo property. So if I restart the server and we make a request to port 3000 API in the browser now, we get an image as a response. That is the image that we posted to the database. So we're successfully retrieving it. Now for updating records and deleting them. So updating a row is very similar to posting a new row. So I'll copy it and change it in the relevant parts. So the query is going to update the users table with some new data, and I want to do that for the first row. I'll change the name so the change is visible, and update the console log message. Apart from that, no changes are required. So a request, this time a put request, and we check the data in the table. We should find, when I refresh it, that the data for the row with the ID of 1 has been updated, and indeed we see the updated name appearing in the table now. Finally, let's cover how to delete a row from the data table. So to do this, we'll create a new delete endpoint. So the query this time is going to be delete from the users table, followed by the ID of the row to be deleted. And it's fairly straightforward with a delete query because we're not posting any data, and we're also not retrieving data from the database. So all we need to do is check for the error and then end the request. Now for the last time, I'll start the server again and make a delete request. So I'm getting back success state of the code. Now you see that the row with the ID of 2 has been deleted from the table. So that is it for this tutorial. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please consider hitting the like button down below this video. It helps us with the algorithm and others to find this video. And if you'd like to see more content like this from us in the future, don't forget you can subscribe to the channel.